Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Not only was President Trump's commutation of Roger Stone's sentence injudicious, says House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, it was also a move that compromised our national security.
It's staggering corruption, but I think it's important for people also to know that it's a threat to our national security. The whole impeachment process was about our national security. Why we are at the Supreme Court on these, we're on the Supreme Court on these cases, was to find out about the Russian connection, and we will continue to pursue that. This case was about the Russian connection. So what the president, we will have legislation that the president cannot commute or pardon or offer clemency to anybody who commits a crime, is convicted of a crime that affects the president's behavior and his culpability. But again, people should know this isn't just about lying to Congress. That means lying to the American people, witness tampering and the rest. And it's about our national security.
That was a bunch of incoherent babble. I don't know exactly what form that forthcoming legislation will take, but the constitutionality of President Trump's move is not in doubt by anybody who has any understanding of the Constitution and his Article 2 power. Not in doubt, not a close call.
And President Trump said, at best, this was just a witch hunt against his friend.
Roger Stone was brought into this witch hunt, this whole political witch hunt, and the Mueller scam. It's a scam because it's been proven false, and he was treated very unfairly.
And you still have the pending matter of General Flynn, and Wall Street Journal editorial board opining over the weekend that a pardon of General Flynn is in order, as the judge in that case, Emmett Sullivan, has done as expected, continued the circus by requesting a en banc review of the D.C. Circuit Court decision directing him to dismiss the charges as so requested by the Department of Justice. This is outrageous and continues the politicized nature of this sorry prosecution, argues the Journal, in saying that Trump should take care of the Flynn matter, too, so we can be done with some of the Russian collusion theater. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation and author of Wiki at War, as well as Private Sector Public Wars. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, great to be with you. It's Monday. Yay.
I'm ready to carpe diem the week, I see. Very good.
Yes.
Knowing what day of the week it is a big deal for me.
So what about that commutation, setting aside the constitutionality, unless you want to try to defend Nancy Pelosi's position, but was that a judicious decision by the president?
Well, I think what really struck me was this claim that this is about national security and that somehow there is any credible evidence that this president has done anything that was remotely pro-Russian, because materially, and we now have 4 years of indisputable history here, where this president has actually done nothing that has enabled the Russian. And I was just sitting here listening to you talk and thinking about, well, if you were suspicious about an administration, you would have been much more suspicious about the Obama administration. So, for example, the Russians cheated for years on the INF treaty. The administration said nothing about it. Matter of fact, pressured the Europeans not to make a big deal out of it. The last administration knew the Russians were operating in Afghanistan, did nothing about it. They essentially gave Putin a green light to do whatever he wanted to in Syria, did nothing about it. They refused to robustly support the Ukrainian government. They essentially had to be shamed into it. They refused to sell arms to the Ukrainian government so the Ukrainian people could defend themselves. They allowed Nord Stream 2, which is the Russian energy project that's essentially undermining European energy security, to proceed without opposition. So actually, if Trump had done all the things the Obama administration had done, as an analyst, I might say, well, they are enabling the administration. Maybe the speaker has a point here. But the reality is all the weaknesses, all the kowtowing, all the advantages to Russia were done under the last administration.
Right. But in regards to this, I mean, the commutation of his sentence, he had Senator Pat Toomey calling it a mistake, Mitt Romney accusing him of historical corruption, and even William Barr thought this was a righteous prosecution and argued against the commutation. Do you think that this is going to be, a political price is going to be paid for this?
Well, this is one. Just to be honest with you guys, look, I do policy, not politics, and I do foreign policy. So I got to be honest with you. This is where you need a lawyer and constitutional guys. You don't need a foreign policy guy on this. To me, bringing foreign policy into this is just clearly delegitimizing the whole effort to question it. I mean, if there really is a serious constitutional issue, if there really is a real legal issue there, then why would somebody say, well, this is about national security? When clearly it is not only not about national security, clearly you are playing the national security card as a political card, which in fact, if you go back and objectively look at the entire impeachment, it was never about national security. It was always about politics. How many members of the Democratic Party in the Congress stepped up and said, we have unimpeachable proof. We know exactly about all the things Trump is doing. And then when they actually produced the results of their investigation, they had nothing. They lied to the American people. So all I can tell you for sure is this is nothing to do with national security other than somebody trying to hijack national security for political gain.
Well, let's talk about actual national security concerns then. Interesting piece by Sheena Greitens and Julian Gerwitz in Foreign Affairs about China, in which they go into some depth in explaining this term that is part of the President Xi Coda, Fang Kong, meaning prevent and control. And they write that under Xi, the Chinese communists have spent years overhauling the country's domestic security apparatus to pursue this ambition of social control, focusing on intensified surveillance, tracking and control of citizens' movements, and the harsh, often preemptive punishment for anyone who the party thinks intends to violate the rules. And they offer this in the context of China's vision for a global public health, essentially suggesting that the response that China offered to the coronavirus is a preview of the response you will see. It'll just be even more harsh and more misleading for the rest of the world were another virus to emanate from China.
Fundamentally, the Chinese Communist Party believes that China's absence as a great power and the essentially being picked on the world that it believes happened in the last couple of centuries ago, that is a historical anomaly, and that China's position as a great power in the world rightfully is unassailable, and that essentially the preservation and expansion of power of the Communist Chinese Party is the secret sauce, is the key to that. So absolute control of the Chinese Communist Party over every aspect of everything they touch, political, economic, military, diplomatic, is essential. And there's nothing more crucial than domestic control. Hong Kong is an absolutely breathlessly stunning example. Essentially, at a period when the Chinese reputation globally it couldn't get any lower, they commit these unbelievable human rights violations in Hong Kong. And the Hong Kong government just came out today and said, well, we're going to be greatly expanding our detention camp for juveniles because we just know there's a lot of youth that are going to need to be re-indoctrinated and re-educated. That's just a stunning statement of where we're going. And Xi's committed to this line. Today they just sanctioned Cruz and Rubio, which again is symbolic, but it's just really kind of throwing down the gauntlet.
Well, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something to this piece too that is concerning, including in this country, as you have some who have some of the same impulses that President Xi does in public office. The medicalization of public security is the phrase they use. Doing these crackdowns under the auspices of public health.
Well, to me, this is just kind of the militarization of policy. Right? Everything that is good for the Chinese Communist Party is a national security concern, and therefore is a purview of the state. So I get really excited, for example, in the clip you just played. Well, this is a national security issue, but clearly it's not, because again, it's attempt to not putting government everything not just in the hands of government, but everything in the hands of one political party controlling government, and that is really deeply disturbing. I get super upset, for example, when people say that climate change is a national security issue. That basically says that the government should take over and that this is an issue where we should tell everybody what to do. And if this is an issue of national security, then we can take a couple of $1 billion from the Defense Department and we can put it against climate change, but that's just as good because we're spending on national security. It is very, very dangerous to spend a national security card, and I agree with you. Bringing out the example of China just shows the natural extension of these policies. And I think it should be concern for people about how we treat our own domestic political environment.
And how should we interpret the move of more military presence into the South China Sea by the United States?
Well, I still think the Chinese are, in a sense, kind of acting out of weakness. I think the virus upset them domestically. It's definitely hurt their economy. It's hurt their global reputation. And the Chinese response to that has been to deeply double down. So, for example, you just say the UK say, hey, we're having Huawei pull out. Now the Chinese are going to take retaliatory actions against the UK. That's like the mafia saying, I'm not going to pay your protection money anymore. And the guy says, okay, we'll just come down and burn down your restaurant. I mean, their behavior has gotten more aggressive and egregious. And I do think it's out of fear as opposed to really a move of strength.
He is Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, VP of the Catherine Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Jim, always a pleasure. Have a good week.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.